Hello, and welcome back to Redefine Parenting. I am your host, Veenu Keller. I want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and H.E.R Network on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Today, I have an amazing guest who I've had the privilege of being on his podcast, and it was really about talking how are we getting our kids to be money smart. You know, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I remember that my mom never had money to give me. I never had allowance. It was if I wanted to raise money, me and my best friend would go around every summer washing cars, pulling weeds, dog walking, you name it. And we would take all of our money and we would put it together and then we would just spend it. And then the next time we needed money, we would just, hey, let's go wash some cars, get some money, and then we would spend it. Although I did not realize we were creating definitely entrepreneurial minds and being able to be creative and create our own money, the one thing that I never had was the opportunity to understand how to save. So when I grew up, it was you had the money and then you had a savings. And whatever you didn't want to spend, we would put into savings. Through my years of growth now as an adult, being a mom, having to have the responsibility of all the bills and, groceries and all that stuff, and being able to be in the personal growth mindset, I've realized that I had to create new habits. I had to figure out like different buckets, if you would. And I would put money in savings, money into contribution. And now I have like 15 different accounts. So I have like my kids' expenses, my vacation expenses, my groceries, my bills, and I have all these different buckets, which is great for me now. And it took a long time. I was not even I didn't even raise my boys to understand the value of money and saving. And so now they too are learning the hard way. So with my twins, we have created a new way of teaching them about financial freedom at an early age. We actually have this piggy bank, I think it's called the Moo Bank, and it's a cow that's divided into spend, donate, save, and one other category. And we always tell our kids that no matter what money you get for your birthday or Christmas, or if you earn money, that you have to put 10% in each of those little buckets, and then you can spend whatever's left. So they're learning now the value of saving, and they really get excited because they love to donate to people, and they love to like buy their own ice cream at the ice cream man, and they also like to buy for their friends. So it's interesting to figure out the knowledge of when do they spend. Well, when I had this conversation with my guest who I'm about to introduce, I realized that there's so many other ways that we can create financial fun through systems that him and his group has created. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Beejel, my amazing guest who's here to talk to us about different ways that we can actually make our kids money smart and have fun with it. So Beejel, welcome to Redefine Parenting.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while.
So tell us, first of all, a little bit about you. I know you're the COO of Financial, right? It's Financial. So
Financial
just tell us
freedom.
a
So
little bit about.
like financial freedom, but we put the fun back into learning about finance.
I love it. So can you just explain to us what is it specifically? What is that group about?
Okay, so financial freedom, really, we're on a mission here. We're a group of entrepreneurs, parents, and a collective from really around the world that really believe that we have to do something today to help the youth of today, the kids and teens, prepare for a better financial future. In their lives. The reason being is if you just simply look at the statistics of adult financial literacy, I have them here. I'm gonna just read them in just a moment. That something has to happen, and it's not a luxury to be teaching our kids about finance. It really is a necessity. But more than just financial literacy, it's kind of combined with entrepreneurial thinking as well. And we'll touch upon both of those areas in just a moment, Veenu. But I really want to start with before the how and the fun, the why, because it's quite serious. So before we kind of get into the fun
Absolutely.
element, let's remind ourselves that why is this conversation maybe the most important conversation that we as parents can start having with our children. And like yourself, my dad was a banker, and I have a degree in aerospace engineering. I'm not saying that to brag. What I'm saying is that when I graduated, and even for the best part of my youth and young adulthood, I was financially illiterate. And that period of time that we are allowing ourselves to be financially illiterate can be costing us millions,
Hmm.
truly millions of dollars, our retirement and our future, because we are avoiding or delaying learning about finance. And here's the thing, it's not complicated. So that's the reality of the situation. It isn't complicated. It's probably the simplest subject we can actually learn compared to everything else we learn in school, but it's still not taught well by schools, still not taught well by parents. And again, if we don't do something today to course correct, we're going to end up creating more of what we see today. So let's start with what we see today, right? So I have it printed out here. um, Again, I apologize for people who are listening in other parts of the world, because these are primarily American statistics, but I think we can kind of correlate these numbers. So 57% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their saving account, right?
Wow. Can you say that one more
On
time?
average, 57% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their saving account, okay? Which
Wow.
means that we're getting to a point that we don't even have enough money saved to go buy a new phone. That's kind of where we are at, given the cost of
Right.
phones these days, right? Um, the average household carries a credit card debt of $8,398. More than 1 in 3 adults in the US have less than $1,000 saved, which we just mentioned. 95% of adults are in some sort of financial debt or scarcity. 95%. And we're just coming on the tail end of the mental health, month and the impact. And we know that money stress is one of the primary reasons that people go through mental health, especially adults and entrepreneurs, through those challenges, right? So we've got to bear that in mind. 53% of US adults are at risk of running out of money in their retirement. Okay. And Americans carry a personal debt of $90,000 overall, right? So all of this, right, literally could be minimized or avoided if we just go back to some fundamental principles, right? And you think you mentioned this early on, that it's a lot of financial reward in the future has to do with our relationship to money, the routines
Mm.
and habits that we form in childhood, because habits and routines we form in childhood, a lot easier to form in childhood, and b, it sets the foundation, because this is a lot. Financial security has a lot to do with time. And the sooner we start, the better off we're going to be. Well, if kids and teens can start in their childhood, even if it's just with $5, saving $5 per month, but the routine and the habit that they can start forming will compound. And compounding in is one of those magic things when it comes to finance. But that's the why, right? I
So
always like to start with this.
I just wanted to piggyback off some of that, because when you are talking about this, I'm thinking, how did we get there? How did we get to the average American being over $8,000 in credit card debt, or how 57% of Americans only have $1,000 in their savings account? And again, it goes back to what you're saying, is what are the habits that we've created? And it's generational too. And some people may be even saying, well, look at our world, look at how much the inflation has gone up. And I believe, because I've started this with my kids, is that if we can create the right habits now for our children, no matter how much inflation goes, no matter how much they make, these type of habits that we're going to discuss today can save them in the future of that stress. It's also going to mend the relationship with what money is. One of the things that I have learned is that in order to increase the money I've had in my life and I had to change the relationship. Like I always heard from my mom is that you got to work hard to make money. You got to work hard to make money. And so when I'm doing my job, which I love to do, coaching, and I'm making good money, I'm thinking, I used to think like, well, I'm not working hard. So did I really earn this money? Is this money mine? Because I'm not working hard to earn money because it's the things that I was hearing growing up. And so as I shifted that relationship, as Beejel was saying, now money flows and I have a respect for money. I adore money. And I don't look at money as a scarcity or a means to an end. I look at it as an opportunity to give more. There was a statement that was made this last weekend. I was a part of a seminar, and somebody asked the question. He said, do you think money solves problems? And a lot of people in the chat were putting no, 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 no. And he's like, if your answer is no, you've never been able to donate enough money to someone else to solve that problem. And I was like, mind blown. And I'm not quoting word for word. That was my interpretation. I was like, mind blown, right? Is that yes, it can solve money. When you have that abundance of money because your relationship has changed with money, we are able to do more in this world going forward with the money. So I just wanted to piggyback off that for a minute about how we start to change that relationship with money. And you said it starts when we're young.
Yeah, and you mentioned something early on that where it's how do we get here, right? Now, I don't claim to be. I'm not a financial expert. So I want to make that clear right up front. I'm a passionate parent who happens to be in the operations space and helping drive this mission. And nor am I a psychologist. So please, anyone listening, I'm coming to you as a parent to parent in this conversation, and we'll talk about my relationship to my children in just a moment. But a big part of the why, Veenu, I believe, is we don't talk about money, generally speaking,
Mm,
right? I mean, even though I grew up in the household where my dad was a banker, upper middle class in the UK, we really didn't talk about money. We talked about other aspects of life and stuff, but not about money. And I think it's somewhat still one of those taboo subjects, right? We rarely kind of want to show our talk about how much money we have, or these nowadays people talk about the crypto and the crypto portfolio and stock portfolio and stuff, but we talk about the good stuff. You don't really show up and say, hey, by the way, I'm carrying this much credit card debt and life's a bit stressful because I don't have enough money to pay bills, right? That's just generally not how we talk. But if you think about this for a second, whether these percentages are correct or not correct, but it says 95% of adults are in some sort of financial debt, right? Which
mm,
means that there's some sort of money stress going on in the home. If we extrapolate what that means, when we normally have debt and we're having a hard time paying credit cards, it normally means it's having some impact on the family, which probably means that money may be a sore subject in many households, right? Which means that we probably will do one of two things: we'll either be arguing about it as
right.
um, in the family, which can have an impact on the kids. Now, think about what our relationship as parents, as adults, is having with money on the children. Now, it could do one of two things. It could make them very uncomfortable with this topic of money. It can make them very, determined to never have that happen in their life. So now they've got this almost like overdrive to be successful. So it
Mhm.
trickles down. Um, and so we got to start with the core, which is the relationship, right? So if we can and a lot of times parents resist wanting to kids to even learn about money. A lot of times when we do presentations, a lot of parents, will kind of send in questions like, well, we're not in a good financial place, and I'm not sure if we really want to introduce this topic to kids. It's almost like they're afraid that what if the kids actually become money smart more than they are? Right?
Ah,
So rather than looking at that as a positive, there's a little bit of pride factor in this
right.
as kind of we're seeing in this thing, which is, while we want our kids to be successful in life, they really will struggle if they don't have this, what we call it one of the fundamentals, right? Financial literacy is being one of the fundamentals, mental and emotional health, physical health, our well-being. So it's these topics that are not being discussed between in a lot of families right now. And that's kind of that's why we call it financial. So we want to kind of put the fun back
back
into
into it.
learning
Right.
about these topics.
And I love how you're doing that because I'll tell you, like, so I have 6 kids. I always talk about them on my show. And my 28 and 23-year-old, they never knew how to write a check. They didn't know how to balance a checkbook because it was not being taught in school. And I remember my 23-year-old, when he was 16 at our local credit union, they had a summer class that's a week long for like 4 hours a day for a week, where you go to the bank and they teach you about a debit card, how to sign a check, how to balance a checkbook. That was the first introduction that he had. And I will say he is probably more literate now about the way banking works, about overdraft, about having money, about saving, because I got him enrolled in that. And I stumbled upon it by accident. Like, it's not even advertised. And you're right. Like, we could teach our kids reading, math, English, history, social studies, geography. That's all great. And learning history is not going to help them, you know, create abundance of money so they can rent a place, buy a place, get their electricity turned on, go grocery shopping. Like, understanding money for our kids so they can learn to be healthy, happy, independent adults is so crucial. And it's still mind boggling why it's not its own subject in school. And I know my son would come back and he's like, that was so boring. I'm like, it was? And he's like, it was so boring. So it just circles back around to what you're saying is, how do we put the fun into this? How do we get our kids? Because if we have fun in it, then they'll buy in, right? It's going to create a buy in for them to want to understand this and learn it. So my curiosity is definitely piqued about the whole fun.
So one part of the fun is to start changing our relationship to money, right? Whether we're going through a challenging time or whether we're successful, and it's we got to start with what is our current relationship to money, because that's going to have a lot of projection on how we introduce this subject into the household, right? So one of the things I like to do, and you can probably see from behind me, I collect a lot of kind of geeky stuff here, um, is we got to know what's fun for our kids, right? First of all, whether it's Harry Potter, whether it's
Mhm.
kind of a Star Wars collection over of this side here, right? So getting into using elements of what they find fun already is a key part of it, right? So before we get into that, one of the ways I kind of get kids to start thinking about the future is by taking them on a little time traveling adventure, right? So I have a TARDIS here. I was a big fan of Doctor Who growing up, and I talk about going back in time. I say, if I could go back in time, what would I do differently? And so starting off by being a little bit vulnerable, being a bit, opening up. Hey, these are things I did as a child, as a youth, as a kid that I kind of wish I hadn't done. Now, we don't like to use the word regret, but I say, hey, it's a very natural feeling. But so what if you can turn regret into a reward, right? And we do that by kind
Mm,
of looking at things that we might kind of regret doing or not doing, and say, great, what do we learn from that experience? That was the reward. And how do we use that reward in the future? And one thing about kids is that that while their imagination is phenomenal, they're actually not that great at thinking about their future, which is why they
right.
do things today without too much, like, the consequence of that 5 years down the road, 10 years is really something that they have a hard time. So I like to use kind of the time traveling concept of, well, hey, let's say you take your current way of being and you go forward in time, right? And we don't do a lot of this stuff. What might your future look like? Combine that with where we are in life. We know that many of the jobs that the school system is preparing our kids for will actually probably not exist 5, 10 years from now, right? So
Hmm.
even helping the kids start thinking about, oh, well, what does that mean? So, well, a lot of things that exist today as work or that your grandparents did will just not be there in the future. There are many examples of that, and that starts kind of making them start thinking. And that's why we also lean towards the entrepreneurial side of this, which is we're not saying that kids have to become entrepreneurs or have to become business owners. We're not saying that at all. But there are certain things about entrepreneurship that regular job doesn't kind of prepare the kids for as well. Resiliency, making kind of choices, being self-managed for, because when we are employees, we are managed. We show up, we do our job, we get
Right.
paid.
And
Entrepreneurship is
ownership.
ownership, and especially given that so many jobs are now have transitioned to home. So that level of self-governance is also very critical as part of this conversation. So we got to open up the doorway to the fun, whatever that is, right? So in my case, my daughters now are 22 and 17, and but we're still big geeks, right? We just came out from a trip to Scotland where we saw the Hogwarts Express go over the viaduct. We went to see Harry Potter, but it allows us to have family conversations. When they
Right.
were younger, um, you know, um, and I didn't even know I was doing it back then, because I didn't really understand my lack of educating my daughters until my daughter actually started creating the videos for the Financial Freedom Program. She goes, "Dad, I've learned more in one weekend," because she had to write, sorry, in the 1 month, by having to write a lot of the programs that she did for the teens, than she ever learned from me. I was like, oh my God, I've taught my daughters how to speak on stage, sales, marketing, business development. They've been to masterminds, but I hadn't actually taught them financial literacy. Why? Because I hadn't really learned financial literacy, in my youth. But the conversation starter is that, which is what do your kids find fun, and then how do you introduce these concepts into that, right? We all go out for meals, right? I think there's no family that doesn't at some level doesn't go out for a meal. Well, you can play games with guessing the bill, right? So making a fun game of, okay, who's closest to guessing how much is going to cost the meal. When we go grocery shopping, we'll teach them about, hey, this is the cost of this product. Can you make a mental note, and at the end of the grocery bill, see who guessed the amount correctly. So little fun elements of, we call it, gamification of real life stuff. That's kind of like level one, introducing this topic. Level two is at the end of the month, when, like, many families will kind of sit down and look at their bills, their credit card things. It's start engaging your kids in that process too. A lot of people, parents, I think, hide financial challenges away from the kids. They don't want the kids to know that they're going through. I'm not going to say what's right or wrong. We've chose not to do that. We're a family, so we operate as a team, as a almost our own little entity, and everything's open. Even when they're much younger, when they're 5 and 10 years old, we would talk about our financial challenges, and I'll talk about our period of time when we went through that. But we always were open book in terms of, hey, this is what's going on, this is how we're going to get through it. And I think it made them a far more appreciative of these kind of conversations. So this is just
Well,
kind of some of the fun ways to start thinking about it.
I was just touching on that. I was working with a family years ago, and the father had a spreadsheet, and he he gives his kids so much money, and he has a budget, and he would allow them to look at the stock market to see what they wanted to invest in, and he would create a budget for them. And like, their daughter was in high school, and he's like, okay, you got prom coming up, you got graduation coming up, you got your senior trip coming up. Let's talk about what it's going to cost, and let's talk about what you have, and let's talk about, this is how much money you have a month. How do you want to allocate it? And these kids, even his wife, were just like, I am so over this budget. Like, I am over the budget. Like, he is all about the budget, all about the budget. So fast forward like 3 years later, and I was talking to the daughter, and now she's in college. I think she's actually getting ready to graduate, or she's a junior in college. And she was like, oh my gosh, life is so great. And I said, she's like, me and my dad are so much closer. I'm like, oh, what changed? She goes, I appreciate the budget. She goes, out of all of my friends at college, I'm always the one to have money to go do things. I never have to say I can't afford it. I am able to do what I want when I want, staying in, because my father, from the early age of like 10 or 11, started these habits in me. And I said, "Oh, isn't that interesting?" I said, "I remember 3 years ago, a senior in high school was so upset at dad because instead of just giving her money, letting her do whatever she wanted, he was very, money conscious about sticking to the budget." And she says, and she just laughed with me and she's like, "And now I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful." She says, "You're right. I did not know what I did not know then. And I'm so grateful for my father because he has really, really hounded it in me." And so every week, because that's what he do, every week they would look at their budget. They would sit down, I think like on a Saturday or Sunday, and they would look at it. If they wanted something, he's like, "Well, let's pull out your budget. Let's see if we can put it in your budget." So he guided them through this because he was so into this. And they're a very wealthy family, but they're very humble as well. And he always lived by that budget. So it goes to show you, even with this example with my past client, is that your kids may not appreciate it now. And as soon as they have the ability to be on their own independently, and they start to see all the different habits that their friends have versus what they have, that's when they get to appreciate that. And even coming to our home, my husband and I, we're like you. We share with the kids. We always talk about the value versus the price. We think that is so important. And my son is really into Baby Yoda. I saw your Baby Yoda behind you. And my daughter is really into like American Girl dolls and Barbies. And we talk about the value. They're like, "Well, I want this, I want that." And I say, "Well, let's look at the price of it." And then when they're all about the ice cream man and they're putting their money out there, and I said, "Well, you have a choice. You can keep spending it on $5 ice creams every time the ice cream man comes along, or just if you skipped 4 times with the ice cream man, you would have enough to buy that Baby Yoda that you want." You have a choice that you get to make. And I really don't care what choice you make. I just want you to be aware of it. And so now when that ice cream man comes along, they come to my office and I said, "Well, what's your choice? What are you saving for? And what do you want immediately now?" And my son makes a choice. He's like, "Well, I want that Baby Yoda." And I said, "Okay, great. So instead you go get a scoop of ice cream out of the freezer versus going and spending $5 at ice cream man." So I feel like this is definitely in correlation of what you're talking about when you're like looking at what is it that they really like, what brings the fun in it. And it also gives them the independence of realizing the choices that they get to make now about being money conscious and about the value of it.
What you've kind of shared is what we call kind of conscious shopping, right, or conscious buying things, right, which is when we a lot of reasons people find themselves in debt is because they're doing a lot of emotional buying of things, right? They've got a
Mm.
nice big screen TV, but there's a sale, and all of a sudden they're at Costco buying another big screen TV, right? Um, and but the root of that is kind of habits. It's emotional insecurity is at the root of so many buying decisions, and hence why we have problems right now with people having tons of external storage space, right? We've got decluttering does. She's in homes all the time helping people declutter because they just came to a realization they've just accumulated so much stuff over the years. And again, America is the largest consuming nation. Why? Because buying or spending money is kind of a very quick fix to not feeling good, in life. So we go and buy more, and again that leads to
It's almost like
more
emotional
credit
eating,
cards.
right? It's
It's
like
much like
emotional eating. Some
emotional
people
emotional
emotional
spending,
eat,
right?
some people emotional spend. And my friend, I have a friend, Summer Rose, who has Star Organizing, and she does the same thing. And she says, "I cannot believe how many homes I go into, like your wife does." And she's like, and it's constantly. She goes, "Veenu, I take away people's clothes that have tags on them, like things that are still in the box, and it's just piling up." And she's like, and what she does is she helps them repurpose it and resell it so they can get the money back. And she says, "But the money they're getting back, they're paying me to come and declutter all their emotional spending." So this is like so important, I think, because if and I talk about this on the show, is that how are we showing up for our kids? So if they see that we emotional buy, then they're going to emotional buy. And I already know, like I have some of the habits my mom does. Like you talk about Costco, something's on sale, so she'll buy 15 of them. And I'll sit here and I'll be like, why is she doing this? Me and my husband always discuss that. And then all of a sudden, I'll find something at Costco, and I'm like putting all this stuff in the cart. And my husband's like, really? Do you think we need 10 of those right now? And like, but they're on sale. He's like, and do we need 10? I'm like, oh gosh, okay, let's not be like my mom. And it's seriously, I'm catching myself in the same habits and having to reprogram my brain. And I'm very grateful that my husband is one of my, like, really, do we need that? So it catches me to like, in the moment, stop doing those habits.
And something you mentioned is like when we can kind of face our reality, and just share that with the kids. Say, look, you know, I want you to be financially smart. In fact, I'd love you guys to be financially smarter than I was, right? And
Right.
here's why. And here's some of my flaws. And I'm sharing this with you because I want you to kind of see that and know that I'm sharing it with you because I want to improve. I want to change this, but I'd rather you, hear it from me now than adopt these same things and be having the same challenges 20 years from now as adults, right? So even these small, authentic, vulnerable conversations can help heal what I call the money relationship
Mm,
as well. So it's there's so many layers to this. People think it's all about learning how to invest, learning how to save. I said, yeah, all of that's great, but there's a
that's
fundamental layer
fundamental.
even below all that stuff. You can buy a gazillion books. Like for my daughter's um, uh, birthday or Christmas, I should say, last year, I bought them this book by Ramit Sethi, right? I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And in that book, I wrote, I said, I'm not going to teach you to be rich because I never really actually learned, how to be. But I'm going to give you the resources to learn to be rich. The choice, because and I'm not saying this is the only book, but I'm saying this book will get you 80% of the way there, if not 100% of the way there, right? But the choice now is on you to go through this and learn how to be financially successful in your
Mm,
life. Now, when I talked to him about this, I said, look, you can choose not to and fumble your way through it like most adults are in the world, or you can choose to read this and start doing the things he's recommending now. My old daughter's 22, or 21 at the time, and my younger one's 17. So now I've given them the power of choice. Now I can't make them do any of this, Veenu, but at least they can't turn around and say, "Hey, Dad, you never gave me the inspiration, never gave me the tools
correct.
to do this," right? So there's that. I'm not saying that because we as parents want our children to be financially successful, they're going to choose to do the right thing. But at least
Correct.
we are giving them the access, we're giving them the support um, to learn. And again, I believe as parents that while we want to encourage and support our kids, ultimately when it's all said and done, it's still their choice. But we've got to play our role in that conversation.
I think also there's a thing about the different generations, right? Like, um, I am, Gen X. I think that's it is Gen X, right? Born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s. Things were different. Our parents, I grew up in the era where both parents are working. My parents were divorced. My mom worked, 3 jobs to put food on the table, put herself through law school. And then the millennial generation, which my older boys were a part of, it was almost entitlement because I feel our generation was trying to make up for all what we thought we lacked or the loss of. So we were trying to give, give, give without saying no. And now this new generation is stumbling through it. And I feel like we're on this correction course. Well, we could be anyway, right? And I feel like that's what, you know, financial freedom is really bringing is like, how do we awaken this generation? How do we, as parents, start the conversation? Like you said, it's a vulnerable conversation to have with our kids. It's laying down the foundation. Forget the whole, like you said, don't worry about investing what stocks right now if you don't have the fundamentals of how to create a better relationship with money, to not be afraid of money, to, and you're right. I mean, when I tell people that sometimes we're afraid of success and people are like, afraid of success because we don't want to be judged by our parents. We don't want to be judged by our friends. Like, oh, she has money now or he has money now. Look at them. They don't want anything to do with us. And they create this own story in their head. And so we retract and we say, okay, we still got to have this relationship, because if we keep doing it this way, like everybody else is doing, then we won't be judged. So it's stepping out of that. And it's really starting to create, as we're moving into this new generation of how do we start changing the conversation? How do we start implementing?
So the how starts with um, finding a reason of why they may want to learn. Right. This is maybe the hardest part of this. Right. Because if I come out a kid and say, kids, you're going to become money smart individuals. Right. I'm going to buy you books. I'm going to buy you this course from Financial Freedom. You're going to be money smart. It's probably not going to work. Right. They're going to be whatever we as parents tell the kids. Is the one thing they probably do not want to learn. Right.
Right.
So we've got to find their button. We've got to find their little hot button of what that might be. So one way is, we as parents have a financial responsibility to provide certain things in our kids' life, food, pay for the roof over their heads, etc., etc. But we can limit. Again, this is just one way. I'm not saying this is the only way. It's like, okay, as part of this, we're going to cover these costs for you, right? The basics, right? Anything above that, you may have to kind of earn your way to it. You can, help out in the home. Now, I don't pay. I've never believed in paying my kids for doing household chores, the regular like washing dishes.
Me
To me,
neither.
that's part of that. I don't get paid as a father to do that. My wife certainly doesn't get paid to do that. And I think we should pay our kids to do things that the family should be taking care of. However,
Correct.
there may be things that are above and beyond that. Maybe things that are maybe my responsibility that I don't want to do, but my kids could help. Like my younger daughter, she entered my business card details into a database. Right, that's my kind of things outside. Maybe doing filing for whatever. So maybe chores or things that they can do that are outside of that. It's level one. But in financial, we teach the kids over a dozen different ways of actually making money. Everything from the lemonade stand to online businesses that they can start doing. A lot of kids are great writers. In fact, most kids are better writers than most adults. There's so
Yeah.
much need for, and there's platforms like Fiverr that we talk about. There's people who are if they're into arts and crafts, there's a way of making money in that. If they're graphic orientated, they can do logos. If they've got video skills, they can do video editing. There is in infinite number of ways that kids and teens today can start making good online income, right? And we have to give them a reason to tap into those skills to start that. So one way is to basically say, hey, as a parent, I'm going to cover this. Anything beyond that, you're going to have to kind of earn your way. You might get a
Right.
little
It's like a
pushback,
budget.
a little bit. Yeah, exactly. You might get a little bit of pushback and going on, but it is what it is, right?
And let me just
But
touch on one more thing. That also brings self-worth to your children, is that they were worth earning that. And that, so if it's the above and beyond stuff, it's like, and then they get that money. And then when they, spend it, it's like a self-worth, like I earned that. It's being proud of yourself. It's celebrating yourself. It's confidence. So I just want our listeners to know that this goes beyond just understanding money. It's like, this gives our kids that connection to themselves.
oh yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I look at the financial education more as a canvas, right? Because we also lean in that kind of entrepreneurship space as well. So hey, kids, learn how to make money, right? We're teaching them self resiliency, self management, creativity, right? Giving as well. We talk about giving a percentage of what you earn, and them learning gratitude. So all of these life skills get wrapped up into this conversation, and the beauty is that the platform that we've built, Financial Freedom Platform, it does the teaching. So we don't
Mhm.
have to be the parents don't have to be the teachers. They just got to be the enablers. They got to just create a reason for these kids to just kind of, oh, you know what? Maybe I should start learning about this. Because think about this: the alternative is that the first big financial decision a lot of kids are going to make is to borrow money to go to college, right? In the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they have very few have a concept of what that actually means when they sign that dotted line and take on that debt. So we are basically saying, hey, before you become financially literate, become indebted, for tens of thousands of dollars. And that's sometimes often the very first financial decision to make, or they get a credit card without even knowing what a FICO score actually means, right? So
Right.
we're kind of introducing kids to money today in a kind of arse around face, in the wrong way around. It's they're getting into it, they're jumping into it without learning the fundamentals. So that's kind of what we're doing. So we just found a kind of a fun way. We've gamified the platform. We've created content for younger kids that's all animated. We've created teen content that's more faster paced, more kind of that TikTok style. But short content videos. There's kind of 6 levels. Each level is divided into 4 elements. We've got the learn, the earn, the accelerate, and the play. The learn is basically concepts about money. The earn are different ways that the kids can make money. As I said, there's so many different ways now, Veenu, that no matter what your skills or your talents, there's a way of using that to make money. We've had families buy this program as young as there's a family of 6 and 7 I'm thinking of right now, and through this they realized that the younger kid was more that kind of the CEO, the visionary, the conversationalist. The older one, who was 7, was more the kind of the operations. So even by allowing their kids to play in this platform to learn, they started to recognize certain character traits that, and both the parents were teachers and said, hey, now we are recognizing this, we can actually better guide our kids' careers and educational careers, based on what we're seeing is their core strengths as well.
That's
So,
yeah, and
so
that's a
much.
great way. 'Cause a lot of parents don't know. They're like, when you say like, "What are your kids' strengths?" They're like, "We don't know." Or are they leaders or followers? We don't know. This is a great way to see. And if they don't know, let them step into that role play. Let them see like this is what a CEO would do. This is what a COO would do. Like, if we were going to just try this on for a week, what would that look like in our family? This is how much money we have. What
Yeah,
if, and we're going to run our house like a business. So if you're the CEO today for this week, how are you going to run it? I think that is amazing. And we only have a few more minutes left. So I'm just curious for our families that are listening, our parents that are listening, what are some of the 3 things or 4 things that you can think of that they can start right now? We already talked about having the vulnerable conversation. We've talked about creating a budget and like going over it weekly with them and being vulnerable enough to talk about real life stuff so they can see and role model. What else could we add to that for our listeners today?
the very first thing I'd say is really look at our current relationship to money, right? How do we
Okay.
feel about money? What are we saying, either in our minds or even accidentally, about money that may be impacting our kids, right? So awareness of our relationship to money, right? Number 2 is open the conversation, open the doorway to having conversation about money, whether you do it over a game of Monopoly, which is one thing I was going to talk about, which is there's a lot of games out there, and I made a list of 3 here. Um, where are they? Monopoly, which everyone knows. There's a cash flow quadrant, cash flow game by Robert Kiyosaki, that people might be aware of. And there's another one called Financial Peace by David Ramsey. So, and there's many more. Like if you just Google, there's literally 20
I like the
dozens and
game
dozens of
life.
games.
The game
Life is
life.
another good one. Yeah, yeah, it's another good one, right? So when you play these games, it allows for conversation to naturally occur, right?
Mm.
Then that led to basically, hey, rather than just learning a game, would you like to learn how to make your own money, so you can kind of buy some of those things that you want to buy, right? So, and then like you said, having that budgeting kind of, hey, as parents, this is what we cover. Anything above that is we're going to help you earn that money, right? And when parents are thinking, but the kids have got homework in school, I get it, right? We're all kind of busy. Kids have got demands. But can we afford not to allow our kids to start learning these fundamentals today? If not today, when? It doesn't get any less busier as life goes on.
And I just want to reiterate that. Can we afford not to allow our children to start understanding the fundamentals of money? My answer is no. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a non-negotiable. We need to. And what I just
exactly.
want to piggyback off real quick is also is like when we do these games like life and cash flow and it's funny, we have all these games at my house too. And Monopoly, you get to start to see from a young age of the impulse buying, the emotional buying, like, oh, I got to buy everything on this side. Like, I need all the oranges, I need all the yellows. And even though they're going to be bankrupt, let me mortgage my property so I can get this. It's so emotional. But we also get to see our own way of our relationship with money too, because as an adult, I was like that. I'm like, oh, I need Boardwalk and Bark Place. I'll mortgage everything I got to get those too. And for what? How often people actually land on them. And it's like, wow, how we play games is how we do life. And we have an opportunity as parents to start them young and start discussing it and ask them better questions. You want a better answer, ask a better questions. Like, so if you bought that property, what is that going to do for you? What's your goal right now? What's your outcome? Let's just, like, before we start the game, let's talk about what's the outcome. And of course, young kids are going to be like, to win. Well, what does win mean to you? Win may be, what, I'm going to have the most properties. Win may be, I'm going to end up with the most money at the end. Win might be, something totally different. It's find out, get curious with your kids. You guys know, my listeners know this, get curious, not critical. And this is a great time, and use these games to create that conversation and start to also pay attention to what your relationship is with money. Like Beejel has been saying, is the first thing is change your relationship, change your story with money first, so we can start role modeling and helping our kids change their story.
Absolutely.
So anything else you want to add? We have a few minutes left. What else? What are some other cool things for our listeners?
I find that a lot of kids and teens right now are many are lacking vision for the future. It's confusing. It's not painted in a very pretty picture. So getting our kids to get excited about what's possible in their future, right? So there's three free courses that we've developed. One is and we have many more in the pipeline. But so teaching kids how to have a vision, we call it a vision quest, right? So things that we as entrepreneurs, or we as people in personal development, have probably done in many shapes or forms, but giving our kids a reason to have a vision. And that's kind of where I go back to the time traveling, right? Which is, hey, if you could go forward in time, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, what would you like your life to look like, right? And so tapping into their ability to have imagination with a future position in time, we start to hear what's important to them. One of the things I always find that parents are, so what do you want to be when you grow up, right? So immediately we jump to the career, right? And is it really fair to ask a 14 or 12-year-old what career they want when even most adults can't actually answer that?
Correct.
So, but it's such a default question that I see, especially Indian families get together. So oh, what are you going to be? What are you going to be studying? What are you going to be doing? What job are you going to have? Right? And
Yep.
and a lot of these kids struggle with that. But if you ask them, hey, what's that vision for your life that you'd like to have? Now, so vision, and then we have another course on goal setting, and another one on mindfulness. Why? Because I think introducing the mindset aspect to the kids is early on is as important of this conversation as well, with everything else we've talked about.
This is amazing. And so I'm just curious for my own sake, because I want to get my kids involved in this. Where do we sign up for these free classes for our kids? Because, again, I want to be that resource for parents out there. How do we get our kids into this financial freedom? How do we find it? What's the website? So parents such as myself, I'm going to go there today because I want to get my kids into this. How do we find this?
If you go to financial freedom, which says FUN, so like financial freedom, but financialfreedom.com, you'll be able to see the different courses we have. We've got courses that combine kids and teens. We have kid courses, teens only courses, free courses, but you'll find everything you need to learn right there, including a free training that goes a little bit deeper in this conversation. It also goes over the entire program as well.
I love it. And thank you so much for your time. And, again, we're not, professional financial people. We're not psychologists. We're not licensed anything. We're just two parents having this great conversation because we are invested in our children. And in order to be invested in our children, we need to start having these real raw conversations. Beejel, thank you so much for coming here, sharing your knowledge, helping parents such as myself to know that there are resources out there so we can start the conversation, so we can help our kids be curious and not critical about their future, their financial future. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Veenu.
Thank you guys for another great session on Redefine Parenting. The show can be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check us out at www.spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.